Good evening, everybody. You can't answer me back, but I'll ask you anyway. How are you doing? If you're doing well, stay silent. So silence. You must all be doing well. If you do have problems, you can send them in the text form as questions. And it seems there are a few still coming in, so we have more tonight to look at. That's one value of a retreat, is you have a chance to practice Dhamma continuously without much distraction or interruption for a few days. So it is a fruitful time to bring up doubts, questions, topics of discussion. Because of that continuity of practice, your mind is right there, we hope, with the Dhamma, with mindfulness, and contemplating these very issues. So sometimes one person's question is another person's question as well. So the first one tonight is from Sam in Singapore. Dear Ajahn, what is the difference between right concentration and right mindfulness in the Noble Eightfold Path? In breath meditation, we are practicing both right concentration and right mindfulness with a question mark. So that's a kind of a question. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are developing this whole eightfold Noble Path or Noble Eightfold Path, which we, for ease of study and memorization and in contemplation, we split it up into its different factors and aspects, but they're all being developed together and they're supportive of each other. So different ways you look at it, like a wheel with 8 spokes. You need all 8 spokes to be there for the wheel to turn and function. Or a bridge over a stream with 8 blocks of rock. They all need to be in place for you to be able to walk over the bridge, get to the other side. So they're all supportive factors in our practice. They're not competing. And if one is missing, then you can't get to where you want to get to. It's okay now. Okay. So, welcome back. We are experiencing impermanence in this very moment. So, anyone who says this teaching of impermanence is not correct, you've just been proved wrong. So, all conditions are impermanent, including Zoom technology, the internet, the mobile signal, whatever is causing the interruption. It's just proving that everything goes according to causes and conditions. I was suggesting maybe lots of people are using the internet in our valley because it's holiday time here. Everyone may be glued to the screen in one form or another, so they're all competing for the megabytes and gigabytes at the moment. Anyway, we will attempt to proceed with our session. So as you might remember, I was talking about Sam's question about what is the difference between right concentration and right mindfulness. And I was just emphasizing all the qualities in the Eightfold Path arise in the one mind, our one mind. But when we discuss them, we discuss them from different aspects. So it looks like we have many different component parts and factors that arise in the mind and support each other, influence each other. So mindfulness is that ability to recollect or direct attention to, pay attention to something. And you can be mindful of many things. You can be mindful in a very ordinary way. Just be mindful of tying up your shoelace. mindful of a breath going in and out, mindful of speech, being aware of what you're saying at this time, or being mindful of listening. It's paying attention to one thing or another. So it's a quality we have, but we also need to improve it, make it stronger, develop the skill of mindful awareness, being able to pay attention. And so we train. We train in sila, because sila is a way of training in mindfulness. We become mindful of our speech, our actions, and the intentions behind it. So mindfulness supports the practice of right action, right speech. To practice right effort, we're also developing mindfulness, because right effort is the effort to bring up wholesome mental states, abandon unwholesome mental states, prevent unwholesome mental states arising, and the effort to cultivate and maintain the wholesome states that have arisen. So that requires some mindfulness as well. It also requires wisdom, say samadhi. And samadhi can even promote the practice of mindfulness, because just listening to the Dhamma can remind you to be mindful. So all these factors support each other, influence each other, but mindfulness is particularly paying attention in the present moment. And if you're practicing meditation, then there may be a particular object you're attending to, for example, the breath. So as you might listen to me or read the descriptions of mindfulness of breathing, you're mindful of long breath, short breath, breathing in, breathing out. If you're paying attention to the breath, then you will become aware of the qualities of the breath. Many, many aspects of the breath become apparent because you're paying attention to it. So one of mindfulness's main tasks is to provide a platform or a seat for wisdom to function, to operate. Mindfulness pulls our attention to where we want it, and then wisdom can see and know and understand and assess what's going on. So they work together. So you always hear this phrase, sati, panya. They're two different aspects of the mind, but they can work together and be present together. When you practice sati in a deliberate way, and particularly when you practice frequently, regularly, it becomes a skill. And one of the results is you get better at abandoning unwholesome states of mind. It's one of the duties of mindfulness is you put attention on the breath, well, other things will start to fade from your experience. So particularly the coarse, distracting states of mind, unwholesome states of mind, will fade out gradually because you're not paying attention to them, you're paying attention to the breath or whatever other wholesome object you're putting attention on. So they'll fade out. And the benefit of that is you start to feel good. You feel better as you have less stressful thoughts, distracted thoughts, agitation, sleepiness, anger, sensual desire, what we call the 5 hindrances, start to fade the more you practice mindfulness. And so you may find you start to experience states of samadhi, concentration, where mindfulness is more continuous on an object, and you'll experience changes in your mind and your perception from that. So you might perceive and develop the experience of the mind being very light, very refined, focused on an object, not distracted, not wavering. And with that you get accompanying feelings of rapture, pleasure, born of concentration, and so on. These are the factors of samadhi start to arise, and you might experience a deeper state of samadhi than your normal waking state where you have some mindfulness, but when you have been practicing you might experience some samadhi where your mind becomes very still, one-pointed. The heart of samadhi is one-pointed attention, or firmness of mind, steadiness of mind. So you experience that maybe for brief moments, and then maybe over time with practice, deeper, longer-lasting states of stillness. But they are states of stillness that have arisen particularly out of the practice and development of the practice of mindfulness. So they go hand in hand. And you can enter a state of samadhi through all your efforts, withdraw from it, and then neglect your practice so you can lose your mindfulness very quickly. That state of samadhi can degenerate and you're back to square one. And I think most people know that experience. But you can also maintain your mindfulness as you develop states of samadhi, and particularly in order to contemplate, develop wisdom, focus on the three characteristics in particular, the universal characteristics of objects, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, anatta, not self, or selfless nature of phenomena. Both samadhi and mindfulness practice will help one to develop deeper wisdom and penetrating wisdom of one's experience. So there are two parts of the path. All these 8 factors of the path are all important, necessary to develop, and they support each other. Next question from Matthew in Singapore. Dear Ajahn, I feel sad as I am not as close to my female colleague as I once was. I understand that this is a part of the impermanent nature of relationships. I usually crave for the nurturing care and support from women, and I know that it comes from a lack of love from my mother. How do I practice mindfulness and wisdom to let go of wanting validation and love from my colleague or from any women in the future? Well, the simple answer is you have to develop the love, the metta yourself. You can't spend your life waiting for other people to love you. You have to learn to develop the love from within yourself. And if you do that, one of the karmic consequences will be that other people treat you well with goodwill and you get good relationships based on unconditional love, metta. That's what you want to be developing. The kind of love that doesn't seek anything in return, doesn't just want somebody so that we can feel good, so we have this friendship or relationship with someone for us to feel good. The kind of love the Buddha was encouraging us to develop is unconditional love. So not seeking anything in return, just giving, accepting, supporting, giving friendship, goodwill to others, male and female. And if you do that, you practice that regularly, and you get into the mindset of not expecting anything in return, not trying to cling on to other people, you find your mind becomes very peaceful, very content, and you have a lot of energy left and other good qualities that you can share with others. And you might find the actual giving up of this desire to be loved and receive love, etc., might actually be the cause for you to receive a lot more love from other people, but in a good way. Reciprocal, unconditional love, which is our ideal, isn't it? To develop respectful friendships based on the Dhamma, being Dhamma friends. But having said that, there is one important and obvious fact that relationships between opposite sex tend to promote attachment, craving and attachment very easily. So one has to be careful. It's so easy to fall in love with a member of the opposite sex. You have to be on your guard if you have a Dhamma friend who is a female colleague, say. That's always a possibility. So particularly if you're already in another relationship, we have to be very careful of any relations with members of the opposite sex. Or if you're, say you're on a retreat, a retreat is not a time to be dating other people or looking for a partner. It's a time to develop the quality of goodwill, mindfulness and wisdom internally, and set aside issues of relationships. I'm not suggesting you're doing that, I'm just saying, there are times in life where It's fine to be single, and we have to be careful of the kind of relationships we're cultivating. Of course, women do have this barami of being very kind, caring, nurturing. And we all need that. When we were born, we were helpless. It was our mother. Not that our fathers that don't do anything, but our mother's love is vital for a newborn baby. And women in the world have an amazing ability to nurture good relationships, nurture people, care for people in so many ways, that it's definitely an important part of society and the world. And we can appreciate the good qualities of women, but one has to be careful not to fall into the craving for that attention or the care, because it's actually going to weaken our mind. If you're craving something, it's going to bring you suffering, basically. Craving leads to attachment, leads to becoming, leads to suffering. So I would just focus on developing your own metta. Make that really strong, unconditional love for everyone, and see what happens. Do it as an experiment. Another question from Kanti in Singapore. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your spiritual guidance. On the first day of retreat, after lunch, I saw very clearly in my mind that there arose a desire to be praised when I saw someone else being praised. Then the thought of a Dhamma talk arose, that praise and blame come as a pair. It is unwholesome to have this wanting, as there is no I, just the five aggregates of clinging. We are just a collection of thoughts and emotions constituting the ego. A few minutes later, the desire came back, and this time the thoughts became more verbal. I wanted to write something to get my share of praise, but I was reminded that we are supposed to be striving to be nobody and not striving to be somebody. Then my body's discomfort subsided after I had written to Ajahn. How do we eliminate this egotistic desire for praise which often dawns upon me? Thank you, Ajahn. Well, you seem to understand the dynamics of this part of life. Praise and blame come as a pair, and nobody's immune from blame, nobody's immune from praise. And we do things sometimes that inspire other people to praise us, or they recognize what we've done. And if there's something that we've done is good, well, we just have to accept praise may come. But be careful, because it's addictive, and like you've pointed out, we can crave it, attach to it, seek it out. So it has its danger. And the Buddha encouraged us to reflect in this way, to understand the experiences of life, to see where the dangers in things that lie, where attachment can form, craving and attachment, where it can form, how to abandon that, how to avoid the danger, how to escape from the danger. So, with praise and blame, Ajahn Chah always used to say, you establish mindfulness, you understand the words, the meaning, and it's just that much. Praise is just praise, blame is just blame. And you can reflect on the causes. Maybe there are good reasons why you've received praise, or maybe somebody has overpraised you or mistakenly praised you for something you didn't do. Or they've blamed you and it's worthy blame and criticism, or maybe it's unworthy and they made a mistake, or they're just being nasty. You can reflect on these things and understand them more deeply, but your main aim is maintain mindfulness and not get lost in the praise or the blame, not allow craving to take over the mind. And that's a constant practice, because as we know, even the Buddha received praise and blame. It's not something that will disappear from the world, from your life. So better to learn how to deal with it skillfully, develop mindfulness and the ability to reflect on it, And if you do see it's a weakness, you crave attention, you crave recognition, well, keep reflecting on the impermanence of it. It's very superficial, it's unreliable, unpredictable. It's not a real source of lasting happiness. And people get it wrong. Better to develop mindfulness and your own insight that you can really rely on to see the impermanent nature of these experiences and rise above them or transcend them in this way. And praise and blame may still come, but you're no longer just reacting to them with emotion. You're now just knowing, it was useful or it was not, it was true or it's not. I mean, praise can give us some indication we're doing something correctly. So sometimes it's useful in that sense, but it can also be exaggerated or unworthy. So bring up more mindfulness, be on guard, be alert, get to know your own character, what your weaknesses are. If you're always craving praise, then sometimes do some things that teach yourself not to keep following that craving. Or if you have a good teacher, sometimes they do it for you. So like there was once a monk at Wat Pah Pong who really craved attention from lay people. He was always wanting to give Dhamma talks and teaching. He'd talk to anyone he could get hold of, basically, because he loved it. And I'm sure he could give good talks, but everyone felt he was a little bit attached to this, seeking the praise, the attention from the lay community. So one day, Ajahn was Luang Por Chah's secretary, and Ajahn had to arrange monks where they would go if they were being sent to other monasteries, sometimes before the rains retreat. Ajahn Chah sends monks out to other monasteries. And so he had to arrange to send this monk who talked a lot, craved attention, to Luang Por Ginari's monastery. Luang Por Ginari is one of Luang Por Chah's teachers, and he's a very quiet, silent monk, and his monastery is very quiet. And some people found it too quiet. But anyway, Ajahn had to tell this monk, you're off to Luang Por Ginari's for the Vasa. And he was very upset because he knew what he was in for, a quiet time. Some monks would love that, others don't, because our characters are different. So Ajahn Chah sent him to a place where he wouldn't get much praise or recognition, even though Luang Por Ginari is an excellent teacher. Some monks would have been really happy to do that, but this monk was very upset, and I think he came back within 8 days. He just quit that monastery and came back very quickly. So sometimes a teacher will find ways to test you and show you your attachment to praise. Sometimes you have to do it yourself and just learn not to follow those trains of thought and those desires. Humble yourself, lower yourself, bring up the mindfulness, just get on with your job and ignore the praise and blame. People always remember many occasions where Luang Por Liam, who is the head of our Sangha, a Sangha of thousands of monks and nuns, probably millions of laity, hundreds of monasteries all over the world, he's the head monk and a very greatly respected teacher and the abbot of the monastery in Thailand. But he's also a very good monk, very mindful, very peaceful, very humble. He never seeks out praise. He just gets on with the job, whatever practice and job he's doing. So sometimes people come up to him and he's just sweeping the leaves or picking up branches in a corner of the monastery, and they'll come up to him like he's just some old granddad monk who nobody knows and is unimportant because they don't know him, and they'll say, oh, where's the abbot's kuti? The place where the abbot, the senior teacher, lives. And he'll say, oh, the abbot's kuti is over there, and points them to his own kuti in the distance. And off they go, looking for the abbot, even though they've just met the abbot. That's someone who's not attached to praise. I just pressed the wrong button. Oh dear. Okay, back with it. New question from Esther in Melbourne. Dear Ajahn, can you explain more about the process of creating a self? Is it through forming an opinion about something and or seeing an object separate from oneself and creating a mental note about it? Is it a separate issue from being one with everything? How can we live in the world without creating a self, and what can help us maintain that view? Thank you. Well, for the Arahant, the whole sense of self has gone. Not just the view, but the conceit, the thought, the experience of this body and mind as self has all gone in every possible way. The mind has reached, we say, the unconditioned, the unborn, the uncreated. If there's no sense of self, then there's nothing to be created, nothing to be born. That's Nibbana. But before that, well, the Sotapanna has let go of the view of self, Sakkaya Ditthi, and that view, like you say, the view that forms of the five khandhas, five aggregates, as being a self or belonging to a self. And a lot of our practices are based around establishing mindfulness, calm, stillness, and then investigating, seeing this sense of self forming around experience. So forming around an opinion, for example, a belief, a view, an opinion can become a basis for self-view. And it's a basis for arguments, isn't it? And that's where you see yourself, the suffering of it, when someone has a different opinion than you. Even about Buddhism, once you've got a sense of self, you've got a basis for suffering there. So that's one way of helping you to see what self is where there's suffering, there'll be an attachment to a sense of self. So it could be something very coarse, very obvious, like you attach to a possession, a material possession. This is mine. And on the conventional sense, that's true, isn't it? You've bought it, you've been given it, you've acquired this thing, whatever it may be, and so you call it yourself, and maybe everyone agrees with you until something happens. Somebody comes along and steals it, or cheats you out of it, or borrows it, or picks it up by mistake, and it's gone. And and then you've got a sense of self there that's feeling a loss. Because you've got a sense of self, then you get a sense of loss of that material object that you invested self in. So investigating very simple, obvious things like that can help you understand how this sense of self forms just over material things. Our house, our possessions, and then this body, my body. And once you have the sense of self, then you have invested in the body, then you've got a body to protect from danger, from disease. This sense of self will form on material things, the view of self invested in material things, whether it's the body or external material things. And we suffer because of it. So reflecting on that, practicing in ways that reduce the sense of self. So we practice dana, giving things away, physically helping other people, using our actions, this body, to do things for others, helps reduce the sense of self. There's one way of looking at this sense of self is to see, before you can completely let go of self, you actually have to develop the good self first. It's just the way it works in the psychology of the mind, the way the mind develops. You can't just do it all in one go unless you're very advanced in the practice. You develop the good self first, the sense of well-being, self-respect, being at ease, at peace with yourself. So you'll see a lot of the Buddhist teachings are about a self, making good karma, practicing generosity, keeping precepts, even coming to meditate. It's all about developing a good self, good qualities, skillful qualities that you develop through the practice, through the Eightfold Noble Path, through dana, sila, bhavana. You develop this good self. But as you're doing that, you're also receiving the teachings from reading what the Buddha taught and listening to talks, meditating, reflecting. And you can maybe start to appreciate even the good self is a form of attachment that can lead to suffering. Obvious one, you have a view, I've developed all this generosity and morality and I'm a good person, and then someone comes along and says you're not. So even good people get angry when they're poked in the right way, because we still have an attachment to self. They might get angry less than somebody who's a very sort of scattered, coarse kind of person, but they'll still have the basis for greed, anger, and delusion there. And recognizing that, they might say, well, I have to deepen this practice. I have to go further, reflect on this further. And that brings you to the development of mindfulness, samadhi, and then vipassana, and insight into these 5 khandhas, seeing that ultimately they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. And even let go of that good self, the perception of the good self, the conceit, and all the ways even the good self establish itself. We have to let go of that, go beyond that. So that's right up to the highest levels of the Dhamma. So you might develop deep states of samadhi, but while there's still a sense of self, it will form around even that. It may be a very subtle, refined sense of self, good sense of self, because samadhi is a good thing, but it's still a sense of attachment to a khandha, as a self, and it'll lead to suffering. As many people have found, you attain a deep state of samadhi and you think, this is great. All my stress is gone, my anger's gone, my worries is gone, the hindrances have gone, this is it. And then it disappears on them and they're back to square one. Or maybe they develop even deeper state of samadhi and they realize what they attached to with their self before wasn't it. And they attach to a new state, of more refined state, with a sense of self. So there's plenty to investigate, and it's like you're peeling off ever more refined layers of self, getting to the core of experience, and you may have previously had a view there's bound to be something there, some kind of self, but then you peel away these layers and you realize it's empty of self. Everything is, we say, everything that appears as self is a condition. You peel away the layers, those conditions, you see them as anicca, dukkha, anatta, or what's left is emptiness. The sense of self drops away. And it might drop away occasionally in different moments of the practice, but one day it might just drop away and never return. But I would suggest developing the good self as a good basis for sense of well-being and being at ease, living in this world, and then from there you can maybe let go of all of this sense of self. Next question from B.H. Chia, Singapore. Can Ajahn explain in more detail about goodwill towards self and others? How do we have goodwill to others even when others have hurt us? It's a hard one, isn't it? Compassion, forgiveness. Make your goodwill so strong that even when people do hurt you, it doesn't take away your goodwill, doesn't change all the good qualities you've developed in your practice. You have to make your mind so well established in the path of the Eightfold Noble Path, the practice of goodwill and so on, that the behavior of other people can't ruin it and take it away or damage it. So say like a sodapanna, a stream enterer, people come along and try to hurt the sodapanna, well, they may experience some unwholesome states arising, like some small fear or ill will arising in their mind, but it won't lead them to break the precepts. That's something we can all aim for. They scold you, they're rude to you, they hurt you, they mistreat you. You feel it, you know it, you've been hurt, but you don't react and break your precepts. You don't scold them back, you don't start a war, you don't hold a grudge, you don't seek revenge. You forgive on that level, you forgive. Forgiveness doesn't mean to say ignoring what they've done or pretending it didn't happen. It means not dwelling on the anger based on what they've done. So the anger may arise, but you establish mindfulness. If you're you're really struggling, you just say, well, whatever happens, I'm not going to break my precepts. I'll be patient with my own mood, and I'm not going to say or do anything in anger. I'm going to carry on doing what I have to do, but I'm not going to give in to my anger and let that prejudice my behavior towards those people. Maybe you can work on that level first. Maybe when you're ready, you go on to a deeper level and say, I'm going to let go of this very anger and see this anger is not self. It's a mental state. It's a mental state of suffering. I don't want it in my mind. I'm going to let it go. And one way to let go is establish a mind in goodwill. Another way is just contemplate the suffering of anger until you're sure, now I'm ready to let it go. And this is totally independent of the other person. This is your own private practice. So my first year as a monk, I went out into the forest, well, not my first year, second year, and went with Ajahn Kalyano and a few other monks. And it's the first time I'd stayed out in a forest with big, dangerous tigers. And the park ranger I got to know, and still know to this day, Yom Vilai, was a very helpful park ranger. This is in Khao Yai National Park in Thailand. The first day we went there, he just told us tiger story after tiger story after tiger story. And they're all young monks going out into the forest for the first time, camping. And he's telling us about these killer tigers that they had in the forest. Just before we went there, a monk had been killed by an elephant. And we got full of all these stories, how his friends had been attacked by tigers, and this happened and that happened. So everyone went to their camp in the middle of the forest in the dark, kind of petrified, thinking, oh, what's going to happen tonight? And there were tigers running around and animals growling and howling and bears and snakes and all kinds of things were there. And then you saw your reaction. So I had quite a lot of anxiety. So the first night in the forest, I didn't sleep a wink the whole night out of anxiety. Because I had put my camp, my mat and my umbrella tent up on a spot which was like a very narrow ridge between two valleys, and it seemed like most of the animals in the forest came by there, so there were footprints everywhere. So I was sure I was going to meet something dangerous, but I didn't. But I had that fear, so I had a lot of anxiety. And I thought, I'm just going to be patient with this. I'm not going to give in to the fear and do something foolish or think something aggressive or stupid. I'm just going to be patient and watch my fear and where it's based on my attachment to my body, sense of self. But there was another monk in our group, a friend of mine, who immediately hatched a plan. If the tiger comes, I'm going to belt him with my umbrella. He went into aggression mode. So he's got this plan. I'm going to get you. If you come up, before you can do anything, I'm going to just smash you over the head with my umbrella. That was his strategy. So there was me sitting there, kind of sweating. Well, patience, patience, patience. I'm not going to give in to my anger, my fear, patience, mindfulness, patience. And this monk was sitting there going, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to smash you on the head. Slightly different approach. So in the morning he came out and we were discussing how we went for the first night and with the teachers, and it kind of came out that this monk was planning to attack the tiger if it came. He thought it was kind of bravado, but then everybody was sort of, hold on, we're monks, you're not supposed to be aggressive or violent, there must be another way, this is why we're here. And it was helpful for him because he saw his own aggression. And that very day we went back after this conversation about how each person's practice was going, and went back to his spot in the forest, and he found that this huge tiger had walked all around his camp. Like there's a little mat on the floor of the forest, and there were these big tiger footprints all around it that had just come while we were talking about the tiger, and he was discussing his plan to attack it. So everyone decided, the tiger is zeroing in on you because of your aggression. He's sort of sensitive, because often animals are sensitive. You've got to change your approach, because he's marked your spot. He's tagged you with his paw prints. And the park ranger came, he said, well, yeah, this is a big tiger, you better be careful. And so everyone said, you've got to start practicing some metta, compassion, forgiveness. And I also thought, that's what I've got to do, because where he was staying is not far from where I was staying. So I thought, if it can go for him, it might go for me. I better practice my metta, my compassion. So goodwill for all tigers. So for my approach was, thinking about it. Tigers, they do attack people, and the park ranger had told us about many stories. They are aggressive, they hunt, they kill. But my approach was to think about it. A tiger lives in the forest. It's not a very good life. The forest is full of problems, mosquitoes. Even if you find your food, it's going to be something that's alive that's going to fight you if you're going to kill it. And tigers get hurt, tigers get killed even by other animals they're trying to hunt, get shot by people. Most people hate tigers, they're afraid of them, or they just want to kill them. I just thought about it, I thought, really, the tiger has a worse time than me. Even though they're aggressive and dangerous beings, they're not going to be very happy. They're always on the run, always trying to struggle to get their food. So for me, I had this kind of change of approach, and I started thinking, really, I just feel sorry for tigers. I'm aware that they're dangerous, but all the anxiety seemed to sort of fade away, and I thought, well, if I meet one, I have nothing against them. If it's going to attack me, it'll have to attack me. That's its choice, but I've got nothing against tigers. I feel sorry for them. I feel compassion. And that seemed to be a much better way of looking at it. So I found I could sit meditation more comfortably, practice mindfulness, reflect in this way. And that monk who had been planning to hit the tiger over the head with an umbrella, he changed his tune and started to practice metta and said, I'm not going to attack the tiger if it comes. And during a period of about 10 days, there were a few encounters we had with tigers, but no one was hurt, no one was threatened. Things turned out well in the end. You might say, well, what is that? If you live in Singapore, there's no tigers there. What relationship to your life does this story have? Well, it's basically the relationship, the things we fear, that we have aversion to. One way to overcome the aversion is to try and understand better what is going on, understand the mind of that person, their situation, what's going on, understand yourself. And with mindfulness, look at the emotions, the reactions coming up in your mind and say, is this is this the wisest way to react? Is this the wisest thing to hold on to in my mind? So you have aggression or aversion towards somebody who has hurt you. Is it the wisest way to plan revenge on them and get angry with them and hold on to this anger? Or is it better to let go, forgive, let go, understand with compassion, move on? So that's just a little story to sort of illustrate my own personal experience. But we have to try and do that with people who hurt us. Try and understand them, forgive them, let go. How do we react when negative emotions such as ill will arise, and how do we generate goodwill at that time? Don't wait until you're angry to start generating goodwill. Do it now. If you're not angry now, this is a good time to do it. That's why we encourage you to practice goodwill every day. First thing in the morning, get up and do it. Do it before you're angry. Do it in the evening when you come home from work or whatever you've been doing. Generate goodwill all the time as a regular part of your practice, as an attitude. The way you speak, the way you talk, the way you interact with other people, the way you help people. And you can have goodwill for people and just be quietly doing something of service to others and nobody knows anything about it, but you're developing goodwill at that time. Or you can be sitting, meditating with goodwill and nobody knows anything about it, but you're doing it. if you do this as a preparation, as a regular practice, then when something stirs your anger, you're ready. It's much easier to return to the feeling and the experience of goodwill if you've been developing it regularly anyway. So don't wait until you're angry to do it, because it's hard to do it when you're angry. You know, you meet someone who's angry with another person and they come to you and you say, oh, just have metta for them. And they say, I can't have metta because I'm so angry. You know, it's going to take a while for them to cool down. So have the metta before you get angry. If you are angry, well, find a skillful way to manage your anger until you've cooled down enough that you can start to develop the thought of metta. So the Buddha said, focus on the good in that person, what you have in common. Like monks in Thailand, we used to have a saying, you know, could you chant at their funeral? If someone's really hurt you, got you angry, could you still chant at their funeral? And if you say no, you've got too much anger in your mind. Well, most monks are forgiving and they know how to let go of anger, so they'll say, yeah, I don't like the guy, but yeah, I'll still chant at his funeral. That's a sign you've still got some metta, even for that horrible person who's really annoyed you and got you angry. You'll still chant at their funeral. So try and find your own reflection that helps bring your mind back to metta, seeing the common things in common you have with that annoying, angry person who's hurt you. You know, you don't want to hold on to anger because you're suffering. And one way to relieve yourself of anger is see the good in that person. Any good thing you can think about them. So time is getting on. Maybe another question. There's quite a few questions still unanswered, so some will have to be done tomorrow maybe. One from Ling Fung in Singapore. Dear Ajahn, I was always reminded by my friend that to be kind to others is to be cruel to yourself. Is that true? Well, it can be. We can overdo it and get burnt out or suffer. We can help others to the point where we got nothing left for ourselves. So we do have to balance these things and reflect on our practice of goodwill. So one way we do that, the Buddha encourages us to develop all 4 Brahmavihara Dhammas. So it's goodwill, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Regularly, all 4 aspects of the Brahmaviharas. And particularly equanimity will help you at times where maybe you're forgetting yourself or overdoing it. And there are still people to help out there and things that need to be done, things you can do with your goodwill. But you also have to say, oh, maybe at this time I have to go easy a bit on the metta for others and take time out for myself, such as going on retreat. You know, when you go on retreat, you may be taking a step out of your work, your social circle, your family, to develop your own practice. So you're having metta for yourself, but the result of this is that maybe you can go back and have more metta and interact with others more skillfully because you've learned things and you've refreshed yourself, recharged yourself. So we have to have that balanced approach where we're not neglecting ourselves, because that could be harmful, and in balance with what we can do for others in different situations. You know, try and look at it in an objective way, a detached way. Like in this situation, what do I need to do? Do I need to just give all my time and energy to this person? Or how much do I need to keep for myself? Or sometimes the people who are an extension of self, so they may have family, kids or parents or somebody who you have to balance your responsibilities, don't you, between your family members and maybe helping people who are outside your family. You know, monastics understand this. You know, you've got to learn to develop your practice to a point where your own practice is strong before you try and take on the world, teach the world, You have to develop sila, samadhi, panya, so you have a good foundation in the practice, and I mean a really strong foundation before you spend too much teaching time and energy teaching others, because you can fall foul of your own kilesas that you're missing because you haven't, if you haven't developed a strong foundation to help others, then as you teach other people, interact with the world, help the world, save the world, maybe it stirs up anger. You know, you get tired and worn out and burned out, and you feel depressed, angry, disappointed, or maybe it can stir up desire. You know, you go out to help people and you end up falling in love with them and disrobing, or you end up seeking praise and being very conceited or arrogant maybe, and then competing with others and having conflicts and clashes with others. There are dangers with the practice of metta that you have to consider constantly and reflect on your practice and adjust from time to time. Back to animals again, as monks we live in the forest, we talk about animals. Like one time I was in a monastery, there's a monkey, a really large kind of monkey, it's called a langur, lives in the monastery, and he absorbed everybody's metta, but he also had very sharp teeth, sharp claws, and sometimes he'd get angry and he'd take a bite out of people and he could really damage them. So I was reflecting, when I lived with that monkey, he liked me because I was a Westerner. It was a monastery full of Thais, and Westerners, we have hair on our arms. And this monkey loved to come up and sit with me and play with my hair and pull the imaginary ticks out of my hair and groom me. And so we had a good relationship. But I was always aware, he could turn because he's an animal. So your metta has to be balanced with equanimity. And sometimes when he was in a mood, I just kind of left him alone, because when he was in a mood, he could bite people. One monk he bit, he left a huge gash in his hand and had to go and get stitches. So metta is like that. Sometimes you metta the wrong way or the wrong time or the wrong person or the wrong monkey, and things can go wrong. So you have to reflect on what's appropriate from case to case, situation to situation, and be aware of the monkeys of the world. There's one last question on the subject of metta, so I'll maybe make that the last question tonight. This is from Mudita in New York. Dear Tanajan, since starting Dhamma practice 5 years ago, I have had strong feelings of aversion arise when practicing metta. I feel like metta will be a very important thing to practice at whatever time the aversion subsides. In the meantime, when I've been guided to metta practice, such as during this and other retreats, I practice patience with the aversion. Occasionally, for a few minutes at a time, I've been able to sustain warm feelings of metta in the center of my chest for certain people and animals. Could you suggest a way to better get in touch with feelings of loving kindness? Well, I'd say maybe just build on what you've been doing. If you've had brief moments of metta for people and animals, build on that. It's a perception, isn't it? So get that perception fixed in your mind, familiar with that perception, the feeling of loving kindness, the thoughts, the trains of thoughts that come with it, the intentions. This is what we call right thought or right aspiration. Nekama, sankappa, renunciation, abhayabhada and ahimsa, non-ill will, non-cruelty. These are part of the path. So they're ways of thinking and tending the mind that you have to practice regularly. So if there's some particular perception, some person, some object that brings up that feeling and that thought, we'll work on it. So generally they say you've got to establish it in your own heart before you can have love and kindness for others. You've got to work on bringing it up here, but sometimes you have to go in a roundabout way. So cute and cuddly animals help. If that's what you like pets and dogs and puppies and cats and things like. My mum lives in an aged care home in the UK, and so they regularly bring in the lovey-dovey dogs and cats for people to pet and have an afternoon petting the pets and enjoying the company of pets. But then they take them away so they don't have to look after them and clean them up and feed them. And they do that in all kinds of places now, don't they? They have the comfort animals, bring them in to get that feeling coming out of goodwill, kindness. And it's very easy to have it for certain kinds of animals. So that's one way. You just build on that, and then little by little you start extending it to other people. And maybe you can't see people as cute and cuddly, but you just get the perception they're still a living, breathing being, human being. They have goodness in them. If they didn't have goodness in them, they wouldn't have been born as a human. So you're focusing in on that goodness, wishing them well. And if it's somebody who has brought up aversion, then you're working on this thought. You wish them to be a good person, improve. If they have bad habits and they've hurt you or other people, done bad things, you want them changing for the better, and goodwill will help that from your end. And they have to change from their end, of course. But if you're holding on to anger, anger is not going to affect a good change on somebody else. It's going to make it worse. So if you genuinely want somebody to improve and be a better person, you have to start with goodwill. And it works with yourself as well. Anger, self-aversion is self-destructive. It's counterproductive. It's obstructing the mind from growing and developing. So you have to find a way to see some of the goodness in yourself and work on that, nurture that. As I said, if you have self-aversion, remind yourself, thank yourself. Like, this is a gratitude retreat, goodwill and gratitude retreat. Thank that person who practiced well enough last life to get you this human birth, this life. I know you may not all believe in rebirth or accept that as a principle, but if you can, it makes life easy. You were in a previous life, you were practicing the Dhamma, and you must have done some good, otherwise you wouldn't have been born as a human being. You'd be in a much worse place. So say thank you in your heart to that person, and nurture that feeling of gratitude to your previous self, your previous incarnation who has done all this good. Now you're continuing the good work of that previous life, whether it's in dana, sila, bhavana, all the good things you're doing. You're continuing this grand project started by somebody a long time ago. Come back to that if it helps, thinking that way. You're developing the good in this heart, and every human heart has the potential for enlightenment, for progress, for opening up to the Dhamma, and you have to work on that, build that up. So don't give up on yourself or others, but it is a work in progress. It's like your project, and we're doing it this period now in this retreat. So that's the end of the meta section of questions. There's still a lot more questions coming in, but we might leave them for another session. I think that's enough for tonight, because the Sangha has to do the Patimokkha now, so we have more things we have to do here, and you can carry on with your practice wherever you are. But we'll end the session now.